This is Kim Lockhead. Welcome to our Q3 product update webinar. I am VP of Marketing here at Knowi, and I have with me Lorraine Williams, who is our Head of Success. So for our agenda today, basically is me stopping talking and handing it over to Lorraine in a couple of minutes. And she's going to go through the highlights of all of the new capabilities that we've added over the summer. And then we're going to have a Q&A session towards the end. So a couple points of housekeeping. The session is being recorded, so we will send it out to you guys after we're finished with it. And then there is a Q&A session towards the end. At the bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A chat box. So please feel free to enter in your questions as we go along, and then we'll address them all at the end. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lorraine.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Q3 Knowi product update webinar. I'm going to touch on some of the main features that that have gone into the product over the last few months. But before I get into specifics, I did want to just remind you all that full documentation and release notes can be found at docs.knowi.com. All docs are fully searchable, so typing in keywords or phrases should usually get you what you're looking for and get you to the right spot. We also deploy weekly, and so this is the best place to go to get up-to-the-minute updates on products' new feature set. We have our release notes here. If all else fails, then sending an email to support@knowi.com will get our attention, and then we'll do what we can to assist you there. So without any further ado, I'm going to log into the system and take you through some of the new stuff we've done. Okay, so one of the main features implemented this quarter has been centered around our machine learning module. It currently focuses on supervised learning, whereby you supply a data set of historical information to train your predictive models and then apply the result model on incoming data. We launched with support for classification algorithms, and we now have recently added regression into the mix. Classification is useful if you want to predict which bucket or category your incoming data falls into, and regression is useful for predicting real numbered values, such as next year's sales projections, etc. So let's take a look at how machine learning works within Knowi. I'm going to click on the machine learning module icon here. For this example, I'm going to use a training set of house prices in the Boston area. This data was actually downloaded from Kaggle as a CSV and then loaded into the Knowi Elastic Store. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new workspace. So house prices, and I'm going to class it as regression. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is create my training data set, or pick my training data set. As I say, it's downloaded from Kaggle as a CSV, and it's now stored in our Knowi Elastic Store. I'm going to prepare the data, and I'm going to have a quick look at it. So here we go. So there's a whole bunch of values here that go into the prediction of house prices in the Boston area. The median value is the value that we want to predict, and this is our training data set. So what this is telling us is for all of these different features and parameters we have here in this instance, this is the median value of house prices, I think in the thousands. Or hundreds of thousands maybe for the Boston area, and that's actually what we do actually want to end up predicting. I'm going to go along and I'm going to then click the algorithm that I want to run. So I'm going to run linear regression, which is OLS, ordinary least squares. And then there's a whole bunch of features here that I can choose. I'm just going to choose all of them for now. Some might be collinear, so you might want to remove those if you're doing this for real, but I'm going to just leave them all in for the essence, to save time right now. And I then need to just select what my predicted my output field should be. So I want that to actually be the median value for the house price. At that point, I'm going to train my my data model, my model, and then I'm going to publish my model right there. At this point, I have my trained model. I now want to go into my query, and I want to basically run a test with real data. So if I look at my regression test, I already have this data loaded too. If I preview it, you should see that median value isn't actually there because we haven't predicted it yet. So now what I want to do is I want to apply the model that I've just created. So housing in Boston. And if I preview it now, you should see that it's run the model against that incoming data, and it's now applied the median value for the house prices in the Boston area. I can then save that and run that as necessary. So basically what we're doing there is we're saying that the model is applied after the query has been executed. This allows us to perform all necessary data manipulation using the query section, as long as the results of our query contain all the attributed fields, of course. The predict class, which was the median value attribute, is automatically added to the result set after applying the model. And the model is applied before the ad hoc query, grid query, which we can see here. So this now allows for further manipulation of the result set. At this point, I just want to touch briefly on functionality that's been in the system for a little while, but I just want to bring it to your attention, which is trigger notifications, because this pairs nicely with machine learning. And what we can say here is that depending on what your data is doing, for example, that median value field that was predicted, you can then trigger an action to occur. And this action can either be quite passive in the form of an email and have the data attached, or it can be more assertive, I suppose, and be a webhook or an API call into another system. So if you were tracking median house prices and something hit a threshold, and we do allow you to enter Cloud9 QL to further refine the results also, you could also then call an API into another system and have an action actually take place automatically. So what we're doing here is we're adding the adaptive intelligence into and the predictive capabilities of machine learning to actually take action automatically based upon what your data is telling you. So I just wanted to highlight, bring that to your attention basically. And this isn't just for machine learning, this is for any data source that you have within Knowi. One more thing that I'd like to mention on machine learning is that we will be continue to enhance the machine learning module over the coming months. A full data prep function is being worked on now, and that will help identify, for example, potential outliers. It will suggest imputing of missing values, creation of dummy values for widening your data set, normalization and things like that. So it's really helping you clean up and get your data set really ready for the algorithms and the models that you want to create. And then, as I said, right now we support unsupervised learning, supervised learning, sorry, with classification and regression. But we will be also bringing online unsupervised learning for example, anomaly detection and k-means clustering, and that will be coming soon. So I'm now going to navigate back to that query that I actually had. Let me see, where is it? Credit card, house price. Sorry, I should have stayed on it while I was there. Let me run it again with that model and preview. So I will now navigate back to this and show you and use this to help illustrate another new feature that we brought online recently, a complementary feature actually to machine learning, but which can now also be useful more generally, and it's the newly implemented statistical data overview. So this allows you to view statistical metadata about your data sets, all data sets, such as the total number of rows and columns, max and min values, number of unique values, mean, standard deviation, obviously for numerical values, and counts and values. That's coming soon actually for nominal values and categories. So in order to do that, you literally just hover over. For example, you click on the little icon here and up will pop for this column, the indus column. It's telling us it's numeric, it's telling us how many are missing. Luckily there's none missing. How many are distinct, the min, the max value, the mean, standard deviation. That will be repeated obviously for any numeric column that we have here. So you can just get an idea of what your data is, how it's constructed, how it's pulled together. And you can also get a feeling for if there's any sort of bell curve or Gaussian distribution in your data also, which can then help you choose if you are going to then go on to do machine learning, it can also help you choose your models, your algorithms. We also have here a new icon, which will give you an overview at a glance. Pretty much the same data as you can see on the individual column level, but just at a glance. Sometimes it's nicer to see everything in one go. So the same thing. This is a nice Gaussian bell curve right there. And you can see the min and max values. What I want to do now is I want to just quickly pop into the account settings, actually, and show you a couple of things that have gone on there this quarter. So if I go into the settings area, so we've basically seen the inclusion of the ability to specifically share assets, data sources, queries, and dashboards to specific users and groups of user. Typically, all data assets are private to the user by default unless shared to other groups. So for example, if I go into the team right now, you can see my team members right here. Actually, if I go back one, I can see what the admin has here. Oops, sorry about that. Go back in here. So the ability to be able to actually share to different groups and users specifically has been added in. So if I look at under the settings, I can go here and I can say whether or not anything that I do, any data source I connect, any query I create, or any dashboards I obviously create, whether or not I want to just keep them to myself or private, or whether I actually want to share to different groups. I've only got one other group defined in my little demo here, and it's the finance team, but obviously there could be more than one, and I could then explicitly say here which groups I wish to share anything I create to. That also is available on the user itself. When you create a user, you can actually you can create new groups, and when you create a user, you can actually say which ones they belong to, and also what role they have and things like that. So if I also look at the view user here that I've created, this is a view user. This icon, this element here, user group and share permissions, is basically saying what type of sharing is this user allowed to have access to. So can they edit anything in the default group, or can they only view anything in the default group, for example? So if anything from if they're in the default group and everything is shared to them, can they just view it, or are they actually allowed to edit it? In this case, they can actually edit. And then on this user, also we can say, and when this user specifically creates something, will they always share? Is it private, or can they share? So we're trying to make it very, very flexible with the sharing between users and actually between groups. And there's also a new feature where you can actually specify the default dashboard. So if you have a lot of dashboards and this user only really needs to go to one the majority of the time, you can specify it here, and every time they log in, that's the one that they will go to first. Other features that we have within just the general account settings, been here for a little while, but I'm not sure if you know, you have the ability to actually create global head and footers, customized header and footers for your, in this is the account wide, but you can actually do it at dashboard level also. And if you do it at a dashboard level, that will actually overwrite the global setting. So you can have global for your whole account, but then a couple of your dashboards within that might have their own specifics. And again, there's the default dashboard thing right there. So right now I'm going to go to the main training dashboard. I'm going to go back. And I'm going to talk a little bit about filters. We put quite a few changes into how filters work right now. So firstly, there's now an option for an admin or creator to specify whether or not a filter is for personal use, i.e. just for themselves. It's something you're messing around with your data. You don't really want to share that filter out with everyone. You don't want to affect anyone else's view of the widget or their dashboard. It's really just for you. Or whether you want it to be available globally, and that's if you're an admin or the creator of the dashboard or widget, you have the power to say that. And then there's also an option for basically resetting it. So if you've set a whole bunch of personal filters and then you just want to back it off now, take them away, they've served their purpose, then you can reset all the filters globally also. So that's just a nice little more granularity on how you can actually set filters. And this applies to the dashboard level and also at the individual widget level too. The same three options now apply for filtering. We do have also the user content filters, the concept of user content filters. And user content filters limit the data based upon criteria associated to that user in particular. So for example, if I can go in basically to user settings again, and if I pull up that, go to team, and I pull up my training viewer user that I created here, you can see there's a little filters icon right here. And basically, this would be applicable, for example, if a national manager may be allowed to see data for all regions, but a regional manager is only allowed to see data for a specific region or for a certain dashboard, for example. So there are two options here. You have filter on query results and query parameter. So filter on query results, let's talk about that first. So this happens after the database has returned the results of the query, and it filters on the returned set of results. So the field name must exist. So you have to be careful, the field name has to exist, otherwise the filter will not apply. So let me try and do something by editing this view user right here to only see airline data for Delta, for example. So where airline, that's the column name in my dashboard, is equal to Delta, and it's a string and it's equals. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and I'm going to go down there and hopefully save that. Let me go back, make sure it was there. Yeah, it's in there. I can see it right here. So I've saved that. So now what I want to do is I want to log out, and I'm going to log in as my view user. And theoretically, hopefully, my view user now will only see on that dashboard Delta Airlines, as you can see right there. So, and that's a basic example, but you can see, how you can limit from the results of the query returned very, very simply what users can and can't see. And I could have had more than one filter there. I could have had Delta and Virgin and Southwest. It's not just one equals or not equals to. I could have as many as I wanted right there. So I'm going to log back in, I'm going to log out, and I'm going to log back in as the admin user. Because there's another way to do this too. So that was basically filtering on query results, but there is another way to do it. So first of all, I'm going to go to that user, and I'm going to take off what I had. Where is she? Oh, here. Right, I'm going to go here, and I'm going to just remove that, and I literally remove it by doing that. And that filter is now gone. And now what I want to do, there's another way to do it, and it is by using a query parameter. So this is for direct queries only, and tokens are passed into the query itself, the token right here. This method is very robust, but you obviously need to have the token present in your query. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So for example, this could be airline right here, and the value could be Delta, for example. And I can keep going, and I can add more, for example. But this token then obviously has to be in the original query. So if I went back to query for airline, let me see, airline tweets here, then in here, that would have to appear in my, my query itself. I could do it by this and do where airline, and then I could have it in here. And then I could do, for example, I think it's actually $C9 underscore airline and a dollar. And all the syntax of this is all in our documentation. But once that's in there, here, then that will match against the one that I put against the user. And that's another way, direct at query runtime, that this can actually be passed in. Another thing I want to talk about, I'm going to cancel out of that, is generating filter values based upon a separate query. So I said that we've made a lot of modifications to our filtering. And this is what this little icon down here means. And by default, the system auto-suggests, for example, if I select airline here, the system here will auto-suggest, it will sample the data it knows of, and it will auto-suggest, magic suggest options. So by default, that's what the system does from sampling the data. If the data set is really, really large, and the selected filter by column has a vast selection of differing values, if there's thousands and thousands of different values that could go in here, then it's possible that not all permissible values would actually be returned to the user for selection. So in that case, we have the idea of a filter hit list. where it allows for dynamic filtering by first creating a query that returns all possible filter values. For example, you might have a list of countries, for example. I don't have it here, but you might have a list of countries. There might be 300 countries, for example. And you want to make sure that the user, if they were selecting country here, would have the full range of permissible countries. So that would be a very, very basic example. The user can then simply select the database icon and add and remove the filter buttons and select the data set that they want to hit, populate this drop down from. This can be very powerful, especially when combined with the user content filtering, as stated earlier, where query parameters are passed into the hit list data set to then only return permissible filter values for that specific user in question. So we can also hone in on what's shown here from the superset of data and limit that also based upon those runtime query parameters that I mentioned earlier. So it's very, very powerful, and again, this is all in our documentation. A couple of other things that have been that have gone in are pagination support for our REST APIs. So we do have the ability to obviously connect to REST APIs, very, very powerful. And so our connector was recently enhanced to support pagination. So sometimes an API may require you to iterate through a number of pages for a given request. Typically, it will also contain a bookmark or a page number field to indicate how to load the next set of data. So to do this, you would just click on the set up the paging field name within this area. And you would enter in the bookmark field name for the response. So that's what's also been added there. Joining across multiple data sources is one of Knowi's most powerful offerings. So we already support the default join type of inner join, along with left outer, full outer, and right outer join. To make the join functionality even more robust, the concept of a loop join was added. So the loop join is now is basically a for loop join, where results from the first query are fed into the second query, one row at a time, based upon the results of the first query. So each row of the first query's results. For each row of the first query's result, the second query will be executed and its result will be combined with the current row. This can be particularly useful when dealing with data from, for example, a selection of REST APIs, whereby you can feed the results of one API call into the call of another one to really hone in on the data that you really want from those multiple joins there. I'm now going to go over to, go back to my dashboard. And I'm going to go to the this widget right here, this basic data grid here. So several enhancements have been made to the data grid itself. So if I click, well, actually I can do it right from here. So first of all, we have the idea of conditional formatting. So if you hover over, you'll get a little circle, and it drops down. Now you can do, you can sort ascending, descending. Obviously, we had that already. You can align your text left, right, or center. You can format your cells. Put percentages, if it's a number or a currency, and things like that, just a little bit more easily than before. And then we also have this idea of conditional formatting. So for example, on this column, which is airline sentiment, I want to basically say if it equals a negative, if airline sentiment equals the string negative, then I want it to go red. Because I actually really want that brought to my attention that something's going on. So it's really just easy on the eye, allows you, it draws your eye to things that might be concerning to you, or good, or whatever fields that you want to highlight. If there's a certain threshold that it goes over, you can also do that too. We've also brought the power of our transformation language, Cloud9QL, to the data grid, so that users that aren't necessarily exposed to the query can still benefit from its use. So typically, Cloud9 can be utilized directly at the query level itself. It's very, very powerful. And for example, to pivot the data in order to obtain airline sentiment counts by airline. So we have neutral, positive, and new, but it's, we want to get basic counts for airline. For that, we would need to do a pivot. So if I click on here and go into the data diagram. This is another way to access your query. Excuse me. Then one way to do this would be through the Cloud9 QL itself, where I could have gone, you know, select airline and then airline sentiment, and then count star as, you know, sentiment count where, you know, airline is not null, and then I'd need to group by airline, and then airline. Oops, I need an underscore sentiment, and that's my very first Cloud9 QL aggregation statement right there. So the first thing I want to do is just do a group by and get a count, and then the second thing I would want to do then is I would want to transpose that data. Airline sentiment, if I can spell it properly. This is very, very powerful language, actually, and you can chain these. What you're seeing me do right now is chain these statements together, just separate by a semicolon. It will run the first one, and then it will run the second one, and the third one, etc., etc., etc. So all of this would get me a pivot table of airline sentiment by airline, the count of airline sentiment by airline, and it would get it. So it would transform that data. And there's one. This is my first group by, my first aggregation, and then I would do my pivot, my transpose. That's how I would do it at the query level. But we also have the ability, I'm just going to cancel that, we also have the ability, where's it go? Let me get it back. If I preview the data, this is what it looks like without that. We also have the ability to basically go in and use our step functions. And this is really bringing the power of Cloud9 QL to someone that maybe doesn't have access to the query itself, but still wants to do that pivot. So here, what we could do is we could say, okay, what I want to do is I want to select airline, and I want to select airline sentiment. Let me go over that, airline sentiment. In fact, I want to group by those. So let me move them over here. Group by airline sentiment, I want to group by airline. And then I also want to do a count of airline sentiment too. So actually, I'll call that sentiment count, excuse me. And I will make that a count. Okay, so now you can see I'm starting to get there. I actually want to filter where airline isn't null, because I know I had some nulls in there, so I don't want those where it doesn't equal null. So get rid of those blank lines. And then what I want to do is I want to group by airline. Oh, I've already grouped by airline and sentiment. So that's my first step. That's my aggregation. So that first Cloud9 QL query that you saw me do, the first one before the semicolon, is going to be the same thing. But I don't have access to that Cloud9 QL up here. But I do have access to steps. Next thing I want to do is I want to add a step. So that's my first one. I've done my aggregation. And now it's allowing me to do something else with that aggregation. So now I want to do select transpose, and we have a whole bunch of functions here that that you can do on your data. I'm going to do airline sentiment. So this is the column I want to split out, and then sentiment. I think I called it sentiment count. Did I call it sentiment count? Or count of airline sentiment, actually. I've got to get it right, otherwise it won't work. And then, is there an underscore I need? Count of airline sentiment. Oh, without the underscore. Okay, there we go. Thank you. Have an assistant. Yay. Oh, okay. Let me just do that. I'll get rid of this. And then I go here. And hopefully this works. Let me just double click it in case it doesn't. What's that?
Name.
Oh, okay. I'll just call it transport. Okay, voila. So basically what I've done there, it took a little while, but what I'm trying to prove is that, you know, you can use the power of Cloud9 QL now at the step level. And if you click on steps, you'll see we have two steps. The first one was the aggregation and the grouping, and the second one was the transpose and the pivot. So that's how we can accomplish the same thing by using steps. So the next thing I want to do is, and this actually leads us nicely into showcasing a couple of new visualizations that have been introduced. So firstly, we have a data summary chart. So let me go back to my widget here. I'm going to go into this tweets by airline sentiment. I'm going to analyze, and this is where I can see all of my different visualizations that I can select right here. I'm going to ignore a couple of things. I think there's stream time, I don't want that. And I want to ignore airline. Okay, so there we go. We've got rid of those. And I want to change this from bar chart to actually a data summary. So let me see if I can find that. Okay, so a little bit dull, but you get the idea. So I've literally changed it to a data summary. From here, I can also, basically change the font size, and stuff like that. The font color can be in green, and all of this. And then there's another thing that's just been added. It also allows you to change it to be vertical, which is also very, very helpful. It also makes it a little bit smaller. So if you've got a lot of information you want to show, you might want to go vertical on this, so you can do either. So that's the new data summary widget right there. The other new visualization that we have is, I'll go back in, excuse me, into Analyze, is the, where is it? It's the threshold widget. So I've changed it to threshold. I'm going to change what I want to look at to be the metric. I want it to be, I don't know, negative. I only want to see negative things. Oh, actually, maybe not. There you go. I don't know if I need to do this or not, but I will try. Okay, so here's only things that are negative, and that gives me a threshold value. So I'm going to say if anything is, for example, below 5, I want it to be green, because that'll be fine. But if it's above 5, then I want it to go red. But the threshold widget is really, really powerful also. So one last thing I want to bring your attention to is the fact that we have added one more data source. We have added the Snowflake cloud-based SQL data warehouse. It's a new market entrant, relatively new market entrant, and we've just basically added that into our arsenal of native integrations for our data on the data source side. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for attending this Q3 product update webinar, and I'd like to pass things back over to Kim for Q&A.
Right, thanks, Lorraine. Sorry about some of the glitches, but now you know that we're doing it live, so well done to us. We have a couple of questions. One question from Petro was around how the alerts work. And if you push data without using an agent, would they run detection on a schedule?
So let me take that on, Kim. So just to set the context, we have a push API that you can use to. You can't hear me?
No.
Come closer.
Sorry, we're getting closer to the microphone.
All right. How about now? Can you hear me now? So we have a push API that you can use to send data to us, right? In addition to connecting to databases directly as well. So the alerts work the same way. Everything is basically data set in our world. It could be a virtual data set that has database queries behind the scenes, or in this case, can be push data to us. And the alerts, it works exactly the same way, where you can basically sit on top and then have scheduled, alert checks that go in and fire off the alerts when needed.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there was also a question about connecting to NoSQL databases.
Yeah,
well.
Yeah, from Stephen. So connected to a NoSQL database rather than a SQL database. So let's.
So I'll try to let me use Lorraine's screen and just walk you through this. So let's say we're connecting to MarkLogic database here. So we'll be connecting it directly in this case, and then and then you can start writing queries on it. Even if the data is multi-structured, you still write, in this case, X query or generate the X queries directly. And say we pick a few of these fields. I need a preview on that. So in this case, I've connected to MarkLogic, run a X query or generate an X query and got some data right off the bat. And all the things that Lorraine showed you on top of the transformations on it, filters and so on, can be plunked in on top of this as well.
Okay, probably time for one more. This is it's around adding emojis to the widgets.
So one of the widget options is this custom visualization, and this can be quite powerful once you get your head around how it works. You can basically plug in a HTML code in directly into the widget, right? So it's, in this case, you got a bunch of CSS and HTML, and looks like what Lorraine has here is basically it's calling out to font awesome, which is basically these creates, you can create icons via CSS. And what it also allows you to do is, if you look at the piece of code here, it says when you type in the two brackets, it gives you a bunch of options. So you can embed widgets in there. So you can have multiple widgets in this widget itself. So you can have two different charts of widgets there, as well as access the data that, in this case, it is total neutral, that's shown here, along with a icon class, which is just a smiley face there, which is via font awesome. But if you haven't looked at the custom widgets, custom visualizations, then it's worth taking a look at. It's pretty powerful.
Okay, great. That is the last of the questions, and we are at time. So I thank everybody very much for attending. We'll send out the recording no later than tomorrow morning, so you have it in your inbox. It'll also be posted on our Facebook page and YouTube channel and yada, yada, yada. So thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.